Alrighty people, we are getting into more animation topics in Maya. Today we're going to talk about animation preferences, setting keyframes, breakdowns, playback controls, and playblasts. Now a lot of these terms, they actually are from Maya. They might sound really strange, but as you are using them and as you're working in the same animation industry, you're going to hear that these terms now they're actually more like verbs. We're going to say things like playblasted or show me a motion trail, things like that, and you slowly this is going to make sense. So let's just go right ahead and then start seeing what we need to see here in Maya. We have the Maya just open a new scene right there. So everything's intact. I haven't really changed anything. We have to go and first change the animation preferences or the let's say the Maya preferences for animation. And that you can reach it by clicking on the icon right here right there down on the screen. You click that icon and then we have this new window that is called preferences, and it has all the preferences for the program. There's a lot of switches, there's a lot of things that we can go and see and set different numbers and things for this, but we should just focus on the animation now because there's a lot of things that we can get confused with easily. So if I go here to settings right there, the first thing that we can see is that we have the units that we are using in Maya, and this is very important from this point because when we're working on visual effects, the units are something that we have to compare to the actual set and then to the scale to the actors, you know, the distance between the camera and then the actors. There's all these things that we're measuring. So these ones we tend to set those ones based on the project. So for now, just leave it in centimeters. You have degrees, that's fine. And then the one that matters the most, it's this one. Time, it says film 24 FPS. That FPS, it actually stands for frames per second. And you can see that we have different settings here, and we only need the one. We usually run things at 24, and that's because we're doing things for film. If you are working on TV, that's going to be on 30. If you're working on games, that's going to be on 30 as well, because they have different rates for these frames and they have different engines. But for film, leave it at 24. The other ones, depending on where you are, you have the PAL if you are somewhere in Europe, and this is mainly because the whole system would be set up like that. So if you send a demo reel that is a DVD, you have to have a PAL setting for that DVD. But you know what, nowadays we have all these websites and portfolios that you can upload through YouTube, Vimeo, and you just upload it and that's it. So leave it at 24. That is very important, because if you have a setting and then you animate something and then you realize that that setting was wrong and then you change it, that has to do with the timing, so everything's going to change. Okay, so now we are done with the settings, and the most important one is the film at 24. From there, we're going to jump all the way down to the time slider, which is this one. And here is where we set the preferences for the speed that Maya is playing our scenes and some other things that you can see right there. First of all, we have the frame range, and then this one, it's related to the time slider down there, like this one down here. So this is something that it is more dynamic. You're not going to set a preference for this, but it's mainly for not having things like fractions. Like if you go 1.10, we don't want to have that. We want to have frames that are integer, and it has to be 1. So just make sure that this one 24 just says 24. But for these ones, we don't really play with those ones. The ones that matter the most here, you would see the one that says key ticks, and every time we set a keyframe, we're gonna see a vertical red bar that shows us that that's a keyframe. You can see that in a moment. And then this one would be the height of the time slider or the timeline right there. This is the height, and it depends on the screen size. Sometimes I'm animating on a laptop, so the screen size is really small, and you don't want to have that. You want to just compress it so you can have more space on the screen. And then some other times, if you have a big screen like this one, things are really hard to see. You have to go close to the screen. So this one, you just make it tall and make the key ticks wider, and then it's easier to see. You're not gonna go blind doing that. So, and then this is that key tick size. And once I have keyframes right there, we're gonna see what it means. Now, time code, we don't really use that in film unless you're doing something that the editorial department is asking you to go and do. We usually leave this one off because we want to see the frames. We animators, we speak in frames always. We say hold it for 1 second, that would be 24 frames. So we say hold it for 24 frames, or give me a hold of 12 frames. Or you know what, that is in should be 3 frames. We just speak like that. We don't say as much like 3 seconds or 2 seconds. And when you have the time code, you can see that this changes right there, and it's showing you this is 1 second, 2 seconds. It's more for film, video portion, like editorial. So it's handy to, sometimes, but we usually keep it on frames. Now the views, I usually keep this one all. And what that means is that when you're doing, if I go back to here to the screen and I just get let's say I just get a sphere right there, it actually means that when you're playing the animation, you want to see the changes on every single viewport. I like that, and again, there's people that are, let's say the preference is just one, or their computers is not really fast enough, so they just have to update one viewport. Which one? The one that they have active, and you can activate that viewport by just clicking on the gray area on the viewport. So when you play the animation, it's gonna update that viewport only. But again, I like them all because I like to see what's happening in every single angle. Now, the other one would be looping, and it's pretty much when you're playing the animation down there, if I hit play now, it is looping, meaning that once it reaches the last frame, it's gonna go back to the first frame and then repeat and repeat. Oscillate, it actually means that it's gonna go back and forth, and it's a cool feature, but to be honest, I haven't used that in years. I just used it once just to see one cycle, and it's pretty much, I was using that for visualizing something and seeing if by playing that in reverse would give me the things that I was looking for. But we just leave it in once or continuous. So once, that means it's gonna play it once and it's gonna stop like that, which is good for presenting things to the director. Sometimes you tell them, hey, come over, can I show you something? And then you play it here. And if it's not looping, it's more clear. If it's looping, sometimes they just go like, okay, it's repeating, and you say, yeah, it's looping. So it's up to you. It's either once or continuous. Now this one right there, this one's again the most important one because we're saying that it has to play at 24 frames, and then this one's related to the one that we set previously. If I go back to settings and I change this one to 30, and then I go back to the time slider option here, this one's gonna change to 30. So if you don't see 24 there, it actually means that you have not set it up yet. So go back to settings, go to film 24, and go back to the time slider right there, and you can see 24. What this means that it says real time, it's actually forcing the computer to either skip frames or add more frames in a way that it keeps the same time, the same clock. Some computers are really fast and some others are really slow. So the fast computers, this would just regulate that, saying slow down, keep it at 24. And then the slow computers is gonna say speed up, keep it at 24. So the slow computer is gonna drop frames. The other computer is going to play smoothly because it's more capable, but it's going to keep it on the on real time, which is just 1 second, 24 frames. And that's pretty much it right here. That's it for the preferences. Once you save the scene, you go save scene, and in this case I would name it week number 8, and it'll be preferences. This would be my scene name. It doesn't have to say preferences, but once you save the scene, you'll be working in the bouncing ball. You save it bouncing ball, so saving the scene, it actually saves the preferences. So you can have one scene that runs at 30. You can open it up, it's going to adjust the preferences. You can have one scene that it has different preferences. So once you open it up, it's going to load those preferences as well. So that's it. Let's move on to the next topic. Let's move on and set some keyframes. Now, first of all, what's a keyframe? A keyframe, it's a keyframe. It actually means that we have a frame on the screen that is important. We have in a sequence or in a shot that could be 5 seconds, we have keyframes that we need to have there that are indicating the story, are indicating the pose, are indicating a certain moment at a certain frame, that we need to have that in the animation. So setting a keyframe in Maya, it's pretty simple. There's different ways of doing that depending on how much let's say how complicated the scene could be. For now, we're just gonna keep it really simple so you guys can understand the concept. So setting a keyframe, let's say that I have a sphere right there, and I just want the sphere to travel from point A to point B, and that would be, I go to the frame that I want to be in, and this is frame 1, you can see it right there. And then I position the sphere wherever I want, let's say there. And then I go to the animation module right there, and then I go here that it says animate set key. You go like that and it sets a keyframe. So by doing this, you're telling Maya at that frame, I need to have the sphere in that position with those coordinates in that you can see in the channel box. You can have all these numbers that you would be keyframed. So there's a couple of things to notice right here. Since I pressed the set keyframe menu, first of all, we see down here in the timeline, we have the red line, and that's the key tick that I was explaining in the preferences. So this is that indication that we have a keyframe right there. And then the other indication is that this channel box, it's actually turning from none or no color, now it's giving you a red color, that it's pretty much saying you have some keyframes right there, at least one. Now let me go and set one more keyframe. So I'll go to frame 24 and then move the sphere that in this case the sphere would be our actor. So saying 24, we want you to be there, and then set the keyframe. We can do it by going to the menu again, set key, or you can see the hotkey, it's a key S. So we just do that, press S on the keyboard, and once again we have down there on the frame 24, we're gonna get the key tick indicating you have another keyframe right there. So now you have one in frame 1 and then one in frame 24. And you can see how the sphere changes positions because now we are communicating to Maya that that's what we want. And if I play the animation with the playback controls down here, you can see now the computer, it's like filling the in-betweens, so it's traveling with, or it's making the ball travel from point A to point B. So that is how you set keyframes, and this is pretty straightforward. Let me just do it again so we can start making some comparisons. And for that, let me bring a cube right there, maybe scale it up and then move it here to the side and then back on the Z-axis so the sphere doesn't run into that. And then go back to frame 1, set a keyframe by pressing the S key, and now you can see the changes right here. Red color on the time slider right there, timeline, and I can go to frame 24 and just scale it up, scale that up like that, and then set the keyframe. So now we have two types of animation. We have one that it's translation, and it's pretty much moving the sphere, and then the other keyframe, which is a cube, would be keyframe on the scaling attribute. You know, it's been keyframing in all of the attributes on the channel box, but the only animation we have, it is on the scaling attribute or the scaling channel. Yeah, so there you are. That's as simple as that. Let me just do it again, bring in something different, and then do another type of a keyframe right here. Torus, like that. And let me get rid of the auto key. We'll get into that in just a second. And let's say that this one set a keyframe on frame 1, or actually frame 10 set the keyframe, and then frame 18 go there and then rotate it on any view, any axis. This doesn't have to be that precise, it's just for viewing purposes. And if I go through that, I can see that now one has been keyframe in rotation, the other one has been keyframe in translation, sorry, in scaling, and then the other one in translation. So now you have all these keyframes, and as you play the animation, now you can see that different things, they happen at different times, and we're also keyframing different values or modifying different values. Better set, like that. So now let me just go into a more useful animation than this one. Let me go for a new scene, get again cube. Let's just animate the cube drop in here. Let's say cube right there, and I'll time it out this time. I'm gonna try to make this cube just fall down and just bounce one on the floor. So go up there, set a keyframe, maybe go to frame 12, and then it falls down. Make sure that it doesn't go through the ground, so it has to be like somewhere there. Set a keyframe, and just a settle right there would be nice. I can go maybe, let's say 5 frames later, and then squash right here, and then move it down so it's always making contact with the ground. So now it goes down like that, and goes up maybe a little bit right there, and I can reset things because now you know what I'm doing. I'm going to go to the channel box, set that back to 1:1:1, which is the 1:1 ratio. So goes up right there and then goes down finally and stays on the ground. So this is small animation. Now I can play with my keyframes. We have been keyframing all the values, although we have modified only the translation and scale or the size of the box here. So this is about keyframes. And let me go back to the preferences so you can see a couple of things here that would make it more clear. If I go back here by clicking on the preferences window, now I can play with things that I can show you. First of all, I'm going to show you the thickness of that key tick by doing this, making larger to this side. Now you can see that it's getting thicker right there, and it's only for display purposes, so it's easier for you to understand that there's a keyframe. And again, it has to do with the screen resolution and things like that, but it's kind of handy to have it. Now, if I switch here from real time to play every frame, and I go back and play the animation, you can see that now Maya, it is playing it really fast, and it does not make any sense with the timing that I had, but it's because it's playing every single frame, and it's taking the speed of this computer, and it's just shooting frames as fast as it can. And it is not the case, it is not what we want. We should always keep it at 24. So you can see how this settings that would be modifying what you see on the screen. All right, so let me save the scene right here. save scene as, and name it week 8. I'm just gonna name it cube. Cube drop, like that. Now that we have the keyframes, remember keyframes, it's a word that it's a term that we've been using since classical animation. It's related to the frames, and sometimes we don't feel that word anymore. But remember, keyframes are the master frames, are key to the scene, are key to the shot. So now that we have these keyframes, we need to start going or pushing the animation to the next level, and then we do breakdowns, what we call breakdowns. So it's just a matter of explaining to either the computer or the director so they can see our way of thinking, and we need to break it down. It's pretty much explaining things first to the computer so the computer understands what we want, and then this is going to translate into better communication with the director. So I'll show you what would be a breakdown. A breakdown would be something that has to be containing more information. Let's see, like this one. If I go to the side view, I can see that the black line indicates the floor. So if I bring a plane and I make it bigger, okay, prepare it. Okay, let me change the color of the plane so we can understand better what's going on. So I'll go to the color section here. Don't worry about this, just enjoy the ride. I'll be creating a new color here. I will make it, let's say, like that, almost like red. Here, whoops, let me just press OK. And yeah, like that, and then go here, just drag and drop, and then eliminate that window again. So now we have the floor, and then we have the cube that is going down and is going through the floor, and we don't want to have that. That is nothing that we want. It's not real. It's not well explained to the computer. It is going through the ground, and it's a mistake, and we are responsible for those fixes that we need to go and address. So that would be a specific time to set a breakdown. A breakdown pose would be going and saying that I don't want you to go below the ground. So here I can either do two things. Either I move this one up and then keyframe it like that. It stays up, and then goes up. So that's one way of doing it. And the other way of doing it, let me just delete that breakdown. The other way of doing it is scaling this one in a way that it's not going through the ground. So going like that and always keeping that volume so it grows and it keeps the mass, and set a keyframe. And then it'll be the same thing. It is not going through the ground, it is staying above the ground, and then it just continues with the animation. So we have keyframes and one breakdown that allows the animation to be more clear. Now that I'm doing this, Maya offers a way of identifying all these breakdowns and then pretty much just making a visual code so we can make a difference between them and the keyframes. So let's say we have frame 1, 12, 15, 18, and 21. They're keyframes, and then 13 would be a breakdown. And then all of them here are red, and we don't want to have them red. So Maya has this that it says convert to breakdown. If you go right click on the menu, on the time slider, you go keys, convert to breakdown, and it is keeping the same information. Basically what it's doing, it is just turning that one into a green color right there. So now that I'm the animator, I can see it. Okay, so I have all these keyframes and I have one breakdown, and it's pretty much one thing that Maya is doing for you, just identifying that. So if you go back and get, let's say you get some notes from the director, and you go back to the scene, and it'll be better organized. So that's how Maya is doing these things. So now one breakdown. So if I play the animation, I go back to the viewport, I maximize set right there, and then I play it. Now it's gonna feel better. The animation's not finished, but this is the blocking pass, what we call the blocking pass, setting the keyframes, and then breakdowns, and then maybe more breakdowns, and then polishing the scene. But with this, you can have a better idea of what it means to set keyframes and to set breakdowns. Let's move on. Let's talk about playback controls and playblasts. Going back to Maya, and we have the scene that we were working on with some keyframes and then one breakdown. Now, if you see on the right hand of the screen, we have the playback controls. Playback controls are pretty much same as any VCR, VHS, DVD, with a few things that are different. We can go back to the first frame with one click. We can go to the last frame with one click. We can go keyframe by keyframe with these ones, or we can go frame by frame as well, that we would be seeing the animation every single frame. And then we have the play control, which is going forward, that once you press it, it actually turns into the stop control to save screen space there on the interface. So you can press it again, it stops the animation. If you go back with this one, the animation plays backwards. And that is very handy actually, because you can have an idea of how things move when you go backwards. And that might sound strange, but when we're animating, sometimes we're animating a lot of follow through and we can't really see it when we're going forward. So sometimes we go backwards. And when we see it playing backwards, it actually brings things that are wrong. We just kind of see it and we're like, okay, so I'm missing that little part, that little bone is not working or something. So it's actually really handy. You would not be playing backwards for the final result or the final submission. It would not make any sense. But for us to have the ability to be going backwards, that makes sense. So this is pretty simple. There's no way you can go wrong about that. You just play with those ones, with those playback controls. When it gets a little bit more complicated is when we have a scene that it is so heavy that our computer would not be able to play it. And that's why we have playblasts. Playblast, it's a term of Maya of creating a movie. So what it's doing basically is that it's going to take a snapshot of every single frame and then compile a movie and then bring it up either in frames or in a QuickTime movie or in an AVI, so you can open it in Windows. It's up to you, those settings, but it's basically that, capturing frames and then compiling a movie for us. So let's get into those controls. There's a couple of things that are related to that playblast. You can find it on window, playblast, right there. And you have options box that you have, at least go and set them once. And for submitting your assignments either to the school and later on in your careers as freelancers or in the studio, these settings are going to change, and then these settings also are going to be given to you by the studio. So let's just get to see what the options are. First of all, time slider, and that is actually pointing to this. So if you have it set to frame 1 to 7, it is only going to playblast or to capture that. If you have it start end, it is going to ignore the range of frames that you have selected with this bar, but it's going to look at this one, the start time and end time. So you can have 50 frames right there, and it's going to ignore whatever other settings you have, because now it's overriding that with this one, and then you playblast it, and so it's going to capture frames from frame 1 to 50, and it's going to make it work in those 50 frames. We go all the way down to show ornaments. Ornaments would be things that are within the scene. Sometimes there would be points, there would be locators, there would be things that are not considered to be a geometry that we see as the character or the eyes or the whole flesh of the geometry. It's mainly control objects. Like if let me just bring something here for you so you can see it, and I can be making my example here better. So if I have the locator right there, just move it all the way here. That's my locator, and if I check that off and I play blast, it's gonna go away, because these things could be really distracting. So that you're saying when you play blast, hide them, take them away. Now let's just jump down all the way here to the format. We have either QuickTime or AVI or the frames. IFF, it stands for image, it's interchangeable frame format. So it's if you want to have frames. We usually keep them on QuickTimes or AVIs, and some studios they would ask you for the frames, because the frames they would be submitted somewhere else, and then they compile the movie with watermarks from the studio, and then they do more work on the editorial department. But for now, keep it on QuickTime if you have a Mac, keep it on AVI if you have a Windows system. And then this one gets important. For the school, you need to use H.264 right there. Keep an eye that there's H.263. Up here there's H.261 and so on. So grab H.264. If you have an AVI codec there, you might not see H.264 because it belongs to QuickTime. So there's an extra step that you need to take. You save it as an AVI, and then we compile that for that purpose. Now the quality, you can keep it all the way to 100 to 70, that would be fine. You can make, depending on the scene, again, this setting would be pretty much compressing. So you're gonna see pixels or a very clear scene, and basically that would be, again, related to the computer speed that you have. If you have a scene that is really big and you have no compression in the playblast, it's not gonna play real time because it's going to drop frames, and we don't want that as well. We want to see these things really quick. So, and then go display size. The way that I do it here is that we have the render settings, or we have the window. Window is pretty much this window, and again, it's all related to your computer. This computer has a pretty big screen, so it's actually measuring the window, and you're saying from the window, do not enter any frames here because it's taking the window, and you can scale it, you can keep it at 1. We don't do that because it's large. We usually go and say, if it's gonna be from this window, just scale it down half the size. And let's just play blast one so you can see what it's doing. I go hit play blast, it's gonna ask me that there's a file that exists if I wanna override it. Usually you say yes because you're making tests and you're making animation and you're just working the same scene. So click OK, and this is what's happening. The Maya viewport compresses to the size of the window, to the size that you specified, and it's capturing every single frame. And now it brings up a QuickTime in this case. If you have Windows, it's going to bring up an AVI so you can play it. Now this is the animation. Now it is playing real time, which is the main difference. You know that what you see on this screen, it is what it is pretty close to seeing in the big screen, in the film, or in the game, or in TV. Just have to make sure that it is not as large that your computer is not able to run this playblast. Okay, let's go back to the playblast options and now get more precise with our settings. First of all, the slider has to be with the entire range. So we said keyframes from frame 1 to 24, set it right there. And go from window, scale it to scale it to half the size. Remove temporary files, keep that one on. Save to file, keep that one on because you're gonna keep the files and you can compare the files. And every time you're making a new one, you can just go and say 1 right there. And it's gonna keep a list of files. You just need to browse and then set the location of those files. We usually keep them in a folder that would be here. If I go up one level right there, we keep them by default in images because it's an output image. So we say drop cube 01 like that, and then save it, play blast it, and now you're gonna have a QuickTime file that is on that location and it's gonna play real time. So in conclusion, the main point or the main difference that I'm trying to make here is that if you play things in Maya with the playback control right there, you might see things that are close, but it's not real time. So you always need to check the work, that when you open the scene or the QuickTime right here, when you play blast it, this one's the one that has the speed, it has the number of frames, it has the timing that you want. It's playing pretty much as close as you can to the film screen, to the TV screen, to the game that you're working on. So this is really important to have that and then understand the difference. Playblasts versus playing back in the computer.